Are they kidding? A new launch date for Starship Flight 7 is revealed. Booster 15 kicks off testing. How did it go? Ship 35 gets brand new catch hardware. How does it work? New Glenn finally completes its static fire when launch. Parker solar probe breaks speed record, traveling 119 times faster than a bullet. My name is Felix. Welcome to What About It? Let's dive right in. Starship updates. Happy New Year, everyone! Well, almost. While we are all still busy celebrating the holidays, SpaceX's progress toward building the world's largest and most advanced rocket has been going faster than ever. In fact, SpaceX wasn't just working on preparations for Flight 7, but also on hardware for Flight 8. After Booster 15 was rolled to Macy's shortly before Christmas, it was placed onto the cryogenic test stand and prepped for its first round of validation testing. And now it's done. We unwrapped presents and SpaceX filled the vault with tested Starship Flight hardware. Talking about New Year's resolutions. After beginning stacking just a few short months ago in June, Booster 15 has now officially kicked off its testing campaign. This started on the 27th as we watched ice creep its way up the booster, which was slowly filled with cryogenic liquid nitrogen. Everything appears to have gone smoothly as the booster detanked shortly after completing its first successful test. This booster is different from previous ones, sporting an upgraded header tank and likely many more invisible changes, so a successful test wasn't necessarily guaranteed. If everything goes well on Flight 7, this booster will carry the first ship to orbit and hopefully back, as if everything goes well, SpaceX plans to attempt a ship catch on that flight. It's also impressive that SpaceX has managed to speed up booster production so much given the size of these vehicles. Booster 14's first cryoproof tests were in early October, meaning it took SpaceX under 3 months to build an entire booster and prepare it for its first test. To put this into perspective, it took NASA 5 years, from 2014 to 2019, from the beginning of the assembly of the core stage of Artemis 1 to having all 4 engines attached. It then flew in 2025, so they launched hardware that began assembly 8 years before ignition. SpaceX was also able to reduce the time between when they began stacking and this test, as it took 8 months for SpaceX to prepare Booster 14, whereas Booster 15 could do it in a little over 6. Of course, this also brings up a bit of a problem that SpaceX may begin to run into, and that's that they've caught up to their booster production. A luxury problem to have. It took SpaceX only about a month to launch Flight 6 after Flight 5, however, if SpaceX's current production speed is a booster every 3 months, that will quickly become a bottleneck. There is one glaring solution though. When SpaceX begins reusing boosters, that should eliminate that problem, however, it is hard to tell when they may start doing that reliably. So with this booster's first test completed the next day, the 28th, SpaceX was off yet again for the second test, filling the booster before detanking around an hour later. This appears to have marked the end of Booster 15's cryogenic testing campaign, as shortly after these tests a new road closure was posted for the 29th between Macy's and the build site to roll the skyscraper back for engine installation. Wow, so SpaceX has been moving insanely fast with Booster 15, but it's never fast enough for SpaceX. They seem to move even faster with Booster 16, as it may have already completed stacking. On the 26th, the methane tank was finally stacked on top of the oxygen tank, although I really shouldn't be saying finally, as this was done in a record amount of time. SpaceX completed this booster in just 71 days from the first segment to its completion. In addition, only 13 days separated the completion of the 2 separate sections from mating them together. For reference, Booster 14 took 110 days to complete its stacking, and there were 23 days between the completion of the 2 sections and their mating. So it's clear SpaceX has yet again increased its booster production speed. Despite the enormous size difference, it appears SpaceX is having an easier time producing boosters than they are ships, as while this booster is essentially completed with only minor work remaining, its counterpart and vehicle that will be joining it, Ship 35, has only just now begun stacking. The likely reason is that a ship is more complex. A booster has no flaps, shield, or payload bay. After stacking first began on the 7th with the 2 payload bay segments placed together, the ship was rolled from the high bay back into the Star Factory for some final touches. Now it has been rolled into Mega Bay 2 for final stacking. On the 26th, around the same time the booster was being stacked, this Block 2 ship's nose cone was rolled from the Star Factory into Mega Bay 2, giving us a good look at it before it was fully assembled. And we were able to spot something truly surprising. But before I lift the secret of how SpaceX achieved all these impossible goals, we've looked into our channel metrics and there are over 2 million returning monthly viewers who have not subscribed yet. Please help us improve the channel even further by double checking that you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our updates. And while you're at it, give us a like and become a wise supporter. Why? Because you'll gain access to a massive amount of extra content. With it, you get access to daily new Starbase photo galleries, including all those we've posted so far, satellite, aerial and ground photos, more than 400 posts in the past 2 years alone, with up to 7 picture galleries per week, insights, chats with me, you name it. Thank you so much, you rock. Now back to Ship 35's secret. Check this out. Wait, what is that? Well, it appears this may be the answer to a question we asked a few episodes ago regarding how SpaceX will catch a ship. Currently, to catch a booster, SpaceX uses a pair of catch pins that stick out from the side of the booster and rest on the chopsticks. These are attached to the hard points on the booster to ensure they can withstand the load. It's the same points they lift the vehicles with. However, if you look at the ship, you will see no such hardware, but rather an indent into which SpaceX inserts a pair of lifting points when stacking it. This method can't be used for a catch though. SpaceX does it this way because any point sticking out of the ship would burn up on re-entry if not properly shielded. Therefore, the catch pins used on the booster can't be transferred to the ship. But then how is SpaceX going to catch the ship? Without pins, it'll be a slippery eel for the chopsticks. How about this? What if it had a retractable pin, similar to an airplane's landing gear? This would be inside during re-entry and then it could deploy for a catch. While it's not guaranteed, these small rectangular cutouts could be the future location of those catch points. This is also supported by the fact that the recessed heat shield tiles appear to end around that area, meaning the heat tiles wouldn't affect this hardware. Also, the general size and shape are similar to the booster catch pins. If that's the case, we might possibly see similar modifications done to Ship 33 to test the hardware on Flight 7 before the hardware is hopefully used to catch Ship 34 on Flight 8. Now there is one more modification that we spotted and reported on last week, the mystery of SpaceX's new red tiles. We have an answer. So is this some kind of futuristic heat shield that uses lasers or something to stay cool? These red tiles weren't actually tiles at all. Wait, what? Yep, when SpaceX completed most of the nose cone tiles, these red mystery tiles were removed. They weren't meant to fly. The red color indicates that these are to be removed before flight. This is similar to how parts that need to be removed before a launch are marked with a bright red tag labeled "Remove before flight." So why would SpaceX do this then? Well, it appears likely that these tiles were purely for alignment. They were installed as a guide that the mechanics could use when installing the other tiles. In the early days of Starship manufacturing, there were huge problems with accurate tile alignment. This is one step implemented to improve it. Likely, this ship will still have numerous changes to its heat shield as SpaceX continues to refine the re-entry process. And while it may not be a flashy red color, whatever changes SpaceX makes to the overall heat shield will be just as impressive, although maybe a little less eye-catching. Okay, so that's all future vehicles, but what about more recent ones, such as those for Flight 7? Has there been news worth reporting? Well, there has been quite a bit of news regarding Flight 7, including a new date we'll discuss later. We'll likely see a launch even sooner than you realize, but SpaceX needs to have the vehicles ready to achieve that. And now that both of them have completed their testing, there is only one component missing: Booster 14's hot staging ring. This is typically the last thing installed on the boosters before they roll to the pad, as it covers quite a few components that need to be regularly accessed. For SpaceX to install it, almost all the work needs to be done. That's why we were so excited when the hot staging ring for the booster was finally spotted rolling to Megabay 2. And then around the same time as the closure to roll booster 15 back to the build site was implemented, a second closure for the 30s was scheduled, meaning the booster should already be at the pad by the time you're watching this. Come on, let's do it. All of this work is incredible to see, and it shows just how close SpaceX is to its goal of catching a ship. The moment SpaceX successfully achieves this space flight, or rather the world will never be the same again. Imagine access to space that doesn't cost $25 million per seat, but instead something like $500,000 or even $100,000 per astronaut. However, one of the key elements of getting that cost down is a high launch cadence, and a single pad isn't going to get that job done all on its own. That's why SpaceX has been so busy building a second pad, and this one has quite a few upgrades. Looking over just a bit from the construction base to Sanchez, we can see that SpaceX is still hard at work building the separate components of this new pad. The launch mount, which will hold the rocket until it is launched, is progressing quickly. The new water-cooled launch deck is almost completely installed. This mount likely still needs quite a bit more work, however it's rapidly approaching completion and the rest of the parts aren't far behind. The flame diverter, which began construction just a couple of weeks ago, has reached a stopping point as there has been little work over the past few days. We can also spot a few larger pipes that were just delivered to Sanchez. Looking at the rough size and shape, it appears likely that these are water pipes that will be used to flow water into the deluge system on the diverter, and based on this photo, the diameters do appear to match well. We also know that the chopsticks are likely almost complete, as work has moved from upgrades and construction to preparation for installation. For that, we need to move to the launch site, as most of the prep work has been done there. Last week, we mentioned SpaceX had begun rolling the parts in for a scaffolding structure that is used to assemble the chopsticks on the ground before stacking, and it appears that the structure is now partly complete. To assemble the chopsticks, SpaceX needs two separate pieces of scaffolding, and they've completed the first. The second will likely take little time, as these temporary structures are designed to be built and torn down quickly. It's likely only a matter of time before they are ready for use. You can already see the pieces for it on the ground here. Once that is the case, SpaceX will finally roll the chopsticks over to this pad for installation. Pad B will hopefully be much more resilient than the previous one. SpaceX has taken all the lessons and hardships learned while launching from Pad A and applied them to Pad B. Although Pad B is still under construction, so SpaceX is still stuck using the flawed design of Pad A. Fortunately, it appears all repair work has been completed ahead of Flight 7. SpaceX has proceeded with the final step before a launch, painting the pad. This is a crucial final step, as paint acts as a protective shield against the harsh elements. In this case, I'm not talking about the harsh elements of a rocket launch, but rather the extremely humid and salty air from the ocean, which is right next to this pad. It eats it for breakfast.
I eat pieces
Starship
like you for breakfast.
You eat pieces of
Starship
for breakfast?
No.
So the pad is ready for launch. Both the ship and the booster have now completed their static fire campaigns as of last week, and we have a license confirmed by the FAA for this flight, so that means everything's in place. And now we have an official launch date. SpaceX will launch on January 10th in just a week and a half. The launch window lasts an hour and a half, starting at 4 p.m., confirming that this will be another daytime launch and daytime re-entry in the Indian Ocean. This launch date and the information come from an airspace advisory posted just a few days ago. They are only slightly different from the previous date we had, which was January 11th. This means SpaceX will be launching a day sooner. Although it appears that this is the same launch date, one crucial detail is missing: time zones. Ship 33 will re-enter the Indian Ocean on the 11th, as it passes the date line on its way around the planet during the flight. Therefore, the filing for the re-entry research plane, which gave us the date initially, would be based on that time. Unfortunately, shortly after this advisory was posted, it was deleted, suggesting a slight change may come. However, it's unclear and most signs still point to this date being the one. At least now we have a launch window and it's clear that SpaceX is more than on track to hit this. If SpaceX can meet this launch date, they will have managed to achieve a turnaround time of around 52 days, which, while more than the turnaround time between flights and 6, is still impressive given all of the hardware changes associated with this flight. Things are really starting to pick up at Starbase. However, another area has also been seeing some action lately, and this time it's not just scrapping. Over here at the Cape, we're finally seeing some action after almost a year of crickets, interrupted of course by hundreds of Falcon 9 and Heavy launches. Fortunately, that has been changing rapidly. It all started earlier this month when SpaceX brought in a few cranes. However, unlike what many of us were hoping for, instead of upgrading, SpaceX decided to use these cranes to tear things down. In this case, they were used to tear down a custom liquid oxygen tank which SpaceX had built before realizing that vertical tanks so close to a launch mount for the world's largest rocket aren't exactly a good idea. Fortunately, it appears that that's not the only work SpaceX has been doing here, as for the first time ever, the chopsticks have moved. Houston, we have chopstick movement. This is a much bigger deal than you'd think, as these chopsticks don't actually have pistons for movement. Instead, they are held in place by a lot of ropes. This movement means SpaceX is likely finally installing the pistons to allow these arms to move on their own. It is clear that work is truly kicking off again here at the Cape, and I for one can't wait to watch a Starship launch from my backyard finally. It looks like by the time Starship arrives, it will have another reusable rocket to keep it company. In this case, I'm not talking about Falcon. New Glenn is finally about to launch. Pinch me! Ah! After years of waiting, it's finally happening, and for real this time. New Glenn has now, after many delays, completed a successful full-duration static fire. This static fire could not have been more incredible, with all 7 of New Glenn's gigantic BE-4 rocket engines igniting for 24 seconds. While not the most powerful, New Glenn is set to be the 3rd largest operational rocket, just behind the Starship and SLS. It's also set to be extremely competitive with most of them. New Glenn is huge, 2 feet short of SLS and the 2nd place, because SLS has a thin escape system on top, New Glenn doesn't. This behemoth of a rocket is truly a milestone accomplishment for Blue Origin. Now that it has completed its static fire and all other necessary testing, all that's left is to launch it. Like Starship, New Glenn's launch date was announced this week. The FAA officially issued Blue Origin a launch license for the maiden flight of what could be the first propulsively landed orbital rocket not developed by SpaceX. The first flight is set for sometime between January 6th and 7th per information regarding air traffic advisory. Thanks to our photographer John Winkopp, who was on location during the static fire, we also know that they weren't taking any time to rest. He spotted numerous tanker trucks going towards the pad following the static fire. It has been incredible to see how quickly New Glenn has been moving recently. However, as quickly as this rocket is moving, it has nothing on how quickly the Parker Solar Probe is moving. In this case, I mean it more literally, as this probe, one of NASA's most daring missions, has just reached a new record. The Parker Solar Probe is currently one of NASA's flagship missions. Its goal is to literally touch the sun. It'll do this by flying so close to the sun that it begins to pass through its outermost atmosphere to get as much information as possible from it. This information can help inform us about things such as the sun's structure and how it works, and it can even help us better understand the process behind how things such as solar flares are created. Contrary to common belief, we do not know much about our parent star. Many glaring questions, pun intended, have not been answered yet. That's why it's impressive that this probe has reached a new record-breaking close approach to the sun at just 3.8 million miles. Interestingly, the Parker Solar Probe broke another record at the same time. To get closer to the sun, you need to speed up your relative orbital velocity. The closer you get, the faster you move. Breaking its previous record, flying above the surface of the Sun, NASA's Parker Solar Probe hurtled through the solar atmosphere at a blazing 430,000 miles per hour or 692,000 kilometers per hour, faster than any human-made object has ever moved. That's 119 miles or 192 kilometers covered in a single second. In comparison, a typical bullet travels at only 0.8 to 1.2 kilometers per second, a snail's pace compared to Parker. It's been fascinating to watch over the years, and this mission is one of the greatest of the past 50 years. I, for one, am looking forward to dozens more missions like these when the cost of getting to space plummets, thanks to all the reusable rockets coming online. That's it for today. Remember to smash that like button, subscribe for more. This is what fuels the algorithm. This is how you can help us for free. Check out our epic shirts in your favorite Space Nerd store. A new Raptor design and our brand new Starship Block 2 design are both up. Link is in the description and in the card you should see now. Also, check out our print store at shop.whataboutit.space to buy a picture for your favorite wall. A significant amount of every purchase goes directly to our photographers. And if you want to train your space IQ even further, watch this video next to continue your journey. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode. New. With boots or friff. Here, you gotta pinch me hard. All right, pinch me. All right, pinch me. Ah!